In the winter of 1492, as the world was being reshaped by maps and conquests, a fire burned in a small, unmarked courtyard in Florence. It was not a bonfire of vanities, nor was it a public execution. It was a surgical removal of history. The man tossing the leather-bound journals into the flames was crying, not out of smoke, but out of grief. He knew what he was destroying. He was burning the only known record of the woman who had calculated the stars. In this video, I challenge the official narrative of mathematical history, but the evidence is scattered in fragments and whispers, and if I fail to connect these dots, her discovery remains lost forever. This isn't just a story about astronomy. It is a story about the moment humanity touched the divine code and flinched. Because she didn't just look at the planets and plot their orbits, she looked at the space between them and found a rhythm. But this rhythm contradicted the church, the state, and the very nature of free will as it was understood then. Therefore, she had to be erased. Imagine a mind that could look at a date of birth and see the geometric shape of a soul. Imagine a woman who realized that the universe is not made of atoms, but of frequencies expressed as numbers. We are going to walk through the smoke of that fire to retrieve the unburnt pages. We are going to reconstruct the life of Alessia, the woman who realized that the stars are not silent, they are singing, and she was the first to write down the sheet music. What was the equation that scared the establishment so much they tried to burn it out of existence? It wasn't about the movement of the earth. It was about the calculation of your fate.
To understand the danger of her work, we must first understand the silence of her beginning. Alessia was not born into the academies. She was the daughter of a deaf stone carver. Because she lived in a world without spoken language, she learned to read the language of structure. She saw how her father would measure the stone, how he would tap it to find the fault lines. She learned that everything that exists has a structural integrity based on vibration. But while her father worked with granite, she became obsessed with time. She noticed that the days her father was angry coincided with specific phases of the moon. She noticed that the market crashed on days when the date reduced to a specific prime number. She began to keep a ledger, not of money, but of cause and effect. This was the birth of her method. She wasn't doing magic. She was performing advanced pattern recognition in an era that called it witchcraft. Therefore, she kept her head down. She realized that the Fibonacci sequence found in the pine cones near the river was identical to the spiral of events in the village history. If the petals of a flower followed a numerical law, why wouldn't the life of a human? She began to chart the births of the villagers. She calculated the sums of their names. And she found that the town drunk and the town priest shared the exact same vibration in their charts, manifested in opposite polarities. This was her first dangerous realization, that saint and sinner are cut from the same numerical cloth, only separated by choice. She was 16 when she predicted the Great Frost. She didn't use a crystal ball. She used a calendar and a piece of charcoal. And when the frost came, exactly as the numbers dictated, the villagers didn't thank her. They looked at her with the suspicion reserved for things they do not understand.
As she grew, Alessia moved from the village to the city, disguised as a copyist for a university. Access to the library changed everything. She saw the works of Pythagoras, but she felt they were incomplete. They discussed the mathematics of music, but they stopped short of the mathematics of biography. Because she had access to the birth records of kings and the death records of tyrants, she began to overlay these dates with the planetary positions she observed from the library roof. She found the correlation. The music of the spheres wasn't just a metaphor, it was a code. She developed a system where the position of the stars at the moment of birth imprinted a numerical signature on the infant. This signature, she theorized, was the life path. But here was the controversy. If the path is imprinted at birth, what happens to free will? This is the question that haunts numerology to this day. Alessia wrote in her secret journals that the numbers do not compel, they incline. She described the life path number not as a train track, but as a terrain. If you are born a 7, you are walking through a forest of introspection. If you are an 8, you are climbing a mountain of power. The terrain is set, but how you walk it is up to you. This distinction was subtle but vital. Therefore, she began to cast charts for the students, anonymously. She would leave small slips of parchment in their books. You are struggling with authority because your chart is ruled by the singular vibrations of the One. Seek independence, not approval. The accuracy was terrifying. Rumors began to spread of a ghost scholar who knew your soul better than you knew yourself. She was calculating the stars, yes, but she was mapping the human heart using the coordinates of the heavens.
The turning point came with the Red Comet of 1488. The astronomers of the court were in a panic, calling it a harbinger of war. The king was preparing to mobilize the armies. Panic was the currency of the realm. But Alessia ran the numbers. She calculated the trajectory, not just of the comet, but of the king's own year cycle. She saw that the king was in a personal year 6, a year of domestic responsibility and protection, not aggression. She saw that the comet's entry degree coincided with the vibration of revelation, not destruction. Because she could not stand to see a war start over a miscalculation, she made a mistake. She stepped out of the shadows. She sent a signed letter to the royal astrologer. The comet brings no fire to the earth, only to the mind. Do not march. The threat is internal, not external. The astrologer, a man of ego and dogma, laughed at the letter. A woman correcting the royal court? But the king, superstitious and fearful, hesitated. The armies were held back for 3 days. And in those 3 days, the plot against the king was discovered within his own castle, just as Alessia's internal threat warning had predicted. The war was averted. The king was saved. But Alessia had painted a target on her back. She had proven that her math was more powerful than their politics. Therefore, she became a person of interest, not to be rewarded, but to be studied. And if she could not be controlled, she would be dismantled. The royal astrologer did not see a savior. He saw a rival who possessed a weapon he could not understand. He began to whisper in the ears of the Inquisition. He told them she was consulting with demons, for how else could a woman know the invisible machinations of the future? Before the walls closed in, Alessia worked feverishly. She knew her time was limited. She began to consolidate her work into what she called the Trinity Key. Centuries before Tesla would famously say, if you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, Alessia was applying this triplet to human psychology. She discovered that the universe breathes in a 3-step rhythm: creation, preservation, destruction, birth, life, death. She mapped these to the numbers. The 3 was the seed, the creative spark. The 6 was the structure, the home, the body. The 9 was the completion, the release, the wisdom. She realized that every human problem arose when this rhythm was blocked. A person stuck in 3 has ideas but no discipline. A person stuck in 6 has structure but no vision. A person stuck in 9 has wisdom but no connection to the earth. She wrote furiously, filling journals with charts that looked like mandalas. She wasn't just writing a diary, she was writing a manual for the human operating system. But as she wrote, the shadows in the city grew longer. She noticed she was being followed. The same beggar sat outside her door every day. The milk she bought tasted strange. The psychological pressure was immense. She had unlocked the code to cosmic harmony, yet her own life was descending into chaos. This is the paradox of the visionary. To see the order of the universe often requires standing in the center of the storm. She decided she needed to hide the work. She couldn't trust the library anymore. She couldn't trust the king. She needed a vessel that would survive the fire she knew was coming. They came for her at dawn. The knock was not polite. It was the heavy thud of authority. Alessia did not resist. She had calculated this day too. Her personal year cycle had entered a 7, a time of solitude and spiritual testing. She walked out with her head high, leaving her room empty, save for a few decoys. The trial was held in a sub-basement of the cathedral. It was not a court of law. It was a theater of intimidation. They accused her of necromancy. They claimed she was communicating with spirits to learn the future. Alessia stood before the tribunal and spoke softly. "I do not speak to the dead," she said. "I speak to the living mathematics of God. If God built the world, he built it with a ruler and a compass. Are you accusing the architect of sorcery?" The silence that followed was deafening. She had used their own dogma against them. Because logic was on her side, they had to resort to fear. But the head inquisitor produced a chart she had cast for a merchant. "You predicted this man's bankruptcy," he sneered, "and he lost everything. You cursed him." Alessia shook her head. "I did not curse him. I saw that his ambition, the number 8, was in conflict with his timing, a year of 4. I told him to wait. He did not. The numbers do not punish, Father. They only confirm. They could not burn her for heresy if she claimed she was interpreting God's design, so they decided to bury her. Not in the ground, but in silence. They demanded she renounce her method. They demanded she say that the stars are blind and the numbers are void. And this is where the history books go blank. Alessia was sentenced to indefinite confinement in a remote convent. She was forbidden from holding a pen or looking at the sky. For a mathematician, this was a fate worse than death. It was a lobotomy of the soul. But you cannot stop a mind like hers. Denied paper, she used thread. She began to weave tapestries. To the nuns, they were simple geometric patterns, pious and orderly. But to the trained eye, they were charts. She wove the Fibonacci sequence into the borders of altar cloths. She stitched the planetary alignments of the next century into the robes of the priests. She was encoding her knowledge into the very fabric of the church that imprisoned her. This is the irony that history loves. The church preserved her work without knowing it. But what happened to Alessia herself? Records show she died of a fever 3 years later. However, there is a discrepancy. The burial records show a date that, when calculated, sums to a master number 33, a number of the master teacher, a number that signifies sacrifice for the greater good. It is highly probable that this date was falsified, a final signal left by a sympathetic ally, or perhaps by Alessia herself. Did she escape? Or did she simply become the numbers she loved so much? The man we saw at the beginning, burning the journals, he was not an inquisitor. He was her brother. And he wasn't burning the real journals. He was burning the decoys. The real work had already been smuggled out, sewn into the lining of a traveler's cloak, heading east.
Centuries passed. The Industrial Revolution turned the world into a machine. The mystic connection to numbers was replaced by statistics and economics. But in the late 19th century, in a dusty antique shop in Damascus, a British occultist found a strange manuscript. It was titled The Loom of the Heavens. The author was anonymous, but the method was unmistakable. It described a system where the name given at birth carries a vibrational frequency that dictates character. This manuscript made its way to the secret societies of London and Paris. It influenced the modern revival of numerology. When we look at the works of Shiro or the early 20th century numerologists, we see traces of Alessia's Trinity key. They speak of the life path, the destiny number, the soul urge. These concepts didn't just appear out of thin air. They were the survivors of a suppressed lineage. Because the knowledge survived, we can now access it. But we lost the context. We treat numerology today like a parlor game, a horoscope in the back of a magazine. We forgot that it was once a matter of life and death. We forgot that it was a science of survival. The manuscript warned that as humanity advanced technologically, we would lose our connection to the rhythmic cycles of time. We would try to force the harvest in winter. We would try to build on shaky foundations.
And looking at the world today, Alessia's warning rings terrifyingly true. We are a civilization that has forgotten how to count.
So, what is the core of her teaching that you can apply right now? It comes down to the universal day. Alessia taught that while you have your own personal path, the world itself is moving through a cycle. Imagine swimming. Your skill is your personal chart. The current is the universal day. If you are a strong swimmer, a powerful chart, but you swim against the tide, the universal energy, you will drown. If you are a weak swimmer, but you float with the tide, you will travel far. To calculate this, she added the digits of the current date until they reduced to a single number. Today, as you watch this, the date has a specific vibration. If it is a 1 day, it is a day for new beginnings. Do not try to finish old business. Start something. If it is a 9 day, it is a day for endings. Clear your desk, pay your debts. Do not start a new relationship. This simple synchronization was her secret to influence. She didn't fight reality, she surfed it. She understood that success is 50% effort and 50% timing. Therefore, the struggle you are feeling in your life right now might not be a lack of talent. It might simply be a mathematical error. You are trying to plant seeds in the snow. You are trying to harvest in the spring. By realigning your actions with the numerical quality of the day, you stop fighting the universe and start dancing with it. This is the gift she died to protect. The knowledge that time is not just a measurement. Time is an energy.
Alessia of the Stars was erased from the history books, but she left her fingerprints on the sky. Every time you look at a clock and see 11:11 and feel a shiver of recognition, you are feeling the echo of her discovery, that the universe is signaling you, that there is a conversation happening between the macrocosm and the microcosm. We challenged the story that mathematics is cold and dead. We found that it is the language of fate. But there is one final open loop. The manuscript found in Damascus had a final page that was torn in half. It contained a calculation for the end of the cycle, not the end of the world, but the end of the current age of confusion. Some interpret the fragments to point to our current era, a time when the hidden knowledge would be revealed to the masses, not just the mystics. That time is now. You are the recipient of the legacy. The fire in Florence could not burn the truth, it only tempered it. Now it is up to you to pick up the calculator, to look at your birth date not as a random accident, but as a set of coordinates. You have a map. You have a compass. The only question is, are you brave enough to read it? Because once you see the code, you can never unsee it. The stars are waiting. Calculate them.